I'm Sam Eckmann of Gold Derby. I am here with Brian Tyler, the three-time Emmy nominee. He is the composer of Clouds, the new film on Disney Plus. And Brian, this film is a really music-driven film because it tells the story of Zach Sobiech, who obviously was a
Yeah.
songwriter himself, as he's dealing with his cancer diagnosis. And I'm just curious, what is the experience like when the film already has so much music as a part of it? How do you have to sort of shift your score making and respond to that when you're
Yeah,
creating?
I mean, I gotta say, Clouds being such a, I mean, it will be a unique experience in my life for many reasons, personally and professionally, because you're writing music that's score for a character that's a real human being that had passed away kind of recently, and he was 17. He wanted to be I mean, he was a songwriter himself. He wanted to do that as his career. He signed with BMI. He had a hit, and and so you have things like his family and his parents and an ex-girlfriend and his sisters and brothers and things like that. And so it's a different thing. I had written themes for like F. Scott Fitzgerald and stuff, but there's this disconnect through history. This is so immediate that it's different. And the fact that he was a songwriter himself, which was part of the backdrop of it, it was almost like doing something that is probably unique in movies or shows or anything, which is it is a true story, that's like a recent true story of a character that wrote music, but then it's almost like a musical, but it's a drama. So this is not like a biopic of like Queen or something. This is very much about him and his life, but something that was so recent. And I think that kind of altered the way I approached it. One, I needed, since these songs were like folk songs and these really sweet, beautiful pop folk songs, we needed a score I felt that kind of could fit with that. And really what I did is I wrote a score, and there was a lot of score in the movie actually that could blend really easily with those songs. And in a sense, I my thought was that I would write a score that he would have written if he continued on and it ended up growing up and decided to become a film composer. And so it became a very emotional experience for me. And what I did is I got from his family, like I would listen to his mixtapes of during the last 2 years of his life, what he was listening to, what inspired him that he was striving for, because he was a learning musician. He was on his way to learning more and more and more. And you could see the trajectory of his skill level, and the chords he would use became more complex even during that last year of his life. So I kind of tried to draw that line. What would happen another 15 years down the road, and if he became a film composer? It was almost like trying to channel Zach. And so he loved a lot of really interesting kind of music that used guitars and things, but they were very ambient and emotional, melancholy and beautiful and outside the pop world, like M83 and Explosions in the Sky and Sigur Rós and things like that. So in a sense, I wrote the theme kind of based on what I felt that he would have written. And so I'm using glockenspiel and I'm using guitars. His guitars, acoustic guitars featured in the movie that he played, and piano and all these instruments that he loved. And I would sing a lot. Like a lot of the score is me singing vocalizations, not lyrics, but it's a huge part of the score. And so all of this was really to say, it will feel seamless kind of dramatically, hopefully, but also as a tribute to who he was as a human being, as a young writer that was cut short, and the world was robbed of what would have been his music. So I just try to continue that in a sense.
Yeah. I think a lot of the score has this sort of ethereal quality to it, I think. And
Right.
I'm always wondering, because you play an impressive amount of instruments, quite a few, and you did used a lot of them on this score, I think.
Yeah.
When you are thinking of a score and you're reading a script for a movie, um, does sort of the dynamic of the sound come to you instantly? Do you automatically know what instruments you're going to need to use, or does that take a lot of experimentation for you?
Good question, man. It varies, and in this sense, there was a method to the madness. And so the fact that I wanted to kind of, I didn't want to play only instruments that he played because it would have been too limited for a score. But I wanted to play instruments that I felt that he would have played, and so and I definitely I kind of like saw a lot. I see a lot of me and Zach, like at 17-year-old Zach. I see kind of like what he was in, what he was listening to, very similar vibe. So when I like sat down to think what instruments should I play and kind of limit myself, I wanted to be that all the instruments on the soundtrack are me. It's a DIY, very much kind of thing. But it did branch out. I played bells and glockenspiel and piano and acoustic and electric guitar, bass, some drums. I even played harp on it. And there you have that clouds literal kind of thing where you would think, oh, when you see something in like a animated thing, you see heaven, you hear harps. Well, in a sense, that is the on the nose version. I wanted to do that, but in a way that really felt genuine and authentic. And so since he liked a lot of music that was postmodern, where it would take music and kind of slow it down and do kind of sampling of it, I would play the harp and then I would run it through granular synthesis and like kind of sampling, and it would turn into this distant almost, and the bells to this distant kind of canopy of just sound that felt like a memory. Like it was, there's something called the disintegration tapes by William Basinski, which is kind of an experimental thing where you would take music and play it on a tape so much that it would disintegrate, and then you would reverberate it. And it's that last gasp of music from kind of trying to make its way, but slightly unsuccessfully, to your ears and to your brain. And that kind of distant harp and piano and bells kind of coming from over, like literally through the clouds and into our ears. It was something that just like jumped out to me as a concept because of the story. And on other things, I'm going to expand this to the big picture. On anything that I score, I kind of look for a conceptual thing to kind of hang my hat on, to kind of be able to hold in my hand. And since you can do anything with music, you almost need to artificially limit yourself. And by doing something like, I'm going to take an intellectual, emotional concept like music through the clouds from someone that has gone but is trying to communicate with us. Just that simple idea dictated not only what instruments to play, because that is only half of it. How do you record it? How do you record the piano? Do you do it with spring reverbs and things from the 70s and delays and guitar pedals and all those things that I did that would be along the lines of things like Explosions from the Sky and kind of experimental music and things that feel more like ambient. And so you don't want to just record it straight like you would like a typical, not a typical, but like most scores will do, like microphone, clean recording, piano, done. Like this was like the reverb of the piano had to be out of tune, so it sounded like the second that you hit a note, it was immediately a memory that was slightly different than the original event, because all of this is done through the memories of his loved ones. So like I wanted all the music to kind of sound like it wasn't exactly the same as the initial note, so all the reverbs are out of tune with the original note. Things like that, those concepts are kind of, I call them like intellectual emotional combinations that you experiment with and see if they work, and they kind of come to you based on the story of whatever you're scoring. And in that way I'm like an impressionist. I've over the years gotten very accustomed to, someone gives me a story, there is a vibe of the tone that we want, and then I react to that and then create something from that. And in this case, that being the cloud score is why it sounds like it sounds. Yeah. And it really ended up being the exact thing that the concept was at the beginning, that I talked to Justin Baldoni, the director. I was like, what about this? And he's like, great. And then we went from there, and it was from then on, it was about writing the melody and the music. And in that case, that ends up being, after you get all that other stuff, the concept out of the way, it ends up being about the written note, the most fundamental thing about what makes music meaningful to a person. And in this case, knowing that his parents were going to hear Zach's theme was such a high bar that I really just agonized over writing that boy's theme, because I knew it would mean a lot to them once they, once they heard it. So it was different in that sense of the process.
It's interesting you talk about someone speaking through the clouds like heaven, because at the end of the film they actually see the Z in the clouds, and I
Oh my gosh.
really love the way that it is constructed, the score going into the credits, because it feels triumphant in a way, like
Yeah.
it's not the end, the story is continuing. How did
Yeah.
you look at constructing that moment?
Yeah, the anthemic nature of while there's tragedy and sadness that we don't shy away from in the movie, Justin as director and me as the composer, at the same time it is such a celebration of Zach and celebration of humanity. We wanted to really regardless of what one thinks about spirituality or what you think of in terms of whether this is our one life to live or there's something after. Any of those things are just left out of it. That's not part of what we're talking about, and we all have different opinions about that. But the idea that it's a celebration, and then it to me personally as well, like it is people live on in a very real way in our memories, and as long as we keep them in our memories, they are immortal. And the beauty and the joy of that, and also the preciousness that every day is, if you really do have this one life to live, and the way that he lived every day beyond what most of us do, and he lived more in those lives, realizing I have a finite end. That the crazy thing is, I think the movie communicates, is we all do. We're all Zach. It's just a different date, and so you want to live each day like Zach did, because it's going to come to an end. Let's do this as a celebration of that concept. And Justin's very good at doing that, and the music needed to approach it in a way that felt like, although that could be seen as a existential crisis, harsh reality is actually a gift. And that's why I think that lift of the music at the end to really feel like anthemic and beautiful and joyous is something that we wanted to go for, leaving the people feeling like, wow, that's beautiful, and it's a life, and it relates to their own lives. It's important to, especially to Justin and I, the director, we make art that is commerce and that is sold, but we're not in it for the commerce side. Justin and I are true blue, like, want to say something artists, and this was the perfect opportunity for that.
Yeah. Well, it was beautifully said, I think. And
Thank
if
you.
if I can also switch gears for one moment, because you're a very busy man, and you also are composing for the series Yellowstone.
Yes.
And that's, on its third season now, and that has a much different, almost like Western inspired score with strings and guitars, and it's very
Yes.
sweeping and grand. How do you, 3 seasons in, you obviously have to keep some identity of the score, but how do you keep that fresh for yourself, having done it for so long?
I'm lucky on that show that Taylor Sheridan, it just changes up that storyline. Like it's a weird, it's gonna sound weird. I'm like a fan of the show. So I do the show because I love working with Taylor, and I just did a movie that came out last week that he directed, Those Who Wish Me Dead, and so I work with him a lot. But part of the joy of doing Yellowstone is that I get to see Yellowstone before other people get to see Yellowstone. It sounds strange, but so the fact that it still surprises me to this day. I'm like, damn, like, what was that? What, like, just a crazy turn, and like, but they're so fucking well done, and it's like the drama is so palatable. It's like Shakespeare, like he's so good at writing, and so what happens is it like just inspires me to continue to expand it's cool because you can expand on themes, but then you can twist them. So some of the themes I'd write for characters in season one, they might have been a villain, and now you slowly have turned, and you're like, wait a minute, I think I'm on this person's side now, and you have to take that theme and turn it into like a protagonist theme. It it is the most interesting long form way of composing. And the fact that we started the show instead of like doing like really traditional American Western music, but it's like the music that was before that, that people came from across the oceans and brought music here. And all that music we know as the Old West is really a music of immigrants. It's people that came here that fled somewhere with their they weren't the like they weren't the super educated musicians stuff. They had fiddles, they didn't have violins. They, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so that sound that we know is the wet, it kind of, so what I did is I went way back like a few centuries of gypsy music from like Ireland and all that kind of thing. So that kind of music now has grown into this like kind of this early, more like dirgy kind of music that was more simple, that's now gotten a lot more complex, but it has its roots in like immigrant music. That, trust me, that one I can see on other shows you could get in a rut or something like that one. There is no chance. It is that he just changes it up so much that it forces me to challenge myself, and it's exciting to me because I just absolutely love that. I love it. Even if I wasn't doing the show, I would love it. That's the cool thing about it, you know.
That's great. Well, I'll just ask one more thing on that vein, since we're running out of time. Is the
All good.
the long, that long form composing of TV?
Yeah.
There is actually a flip side to it, where there's often a main title theme, which you have done for that as well. And one of your Emmy nominations is for outstanding main title theme for Sleepy Hollow. I would imagine that is such pressure, or just to me a seemingly impossible task, to sort of like, how do I sum up this show with one theme? You have an Emmy nomination for it, so you must be an expert. What is your take on that? How do you attack that?
Is that, and I think and Transformers Prime was the theme. I think that was the theme as well. But yeah, it's weird. I've done a bunch of themes that like brand either a show. It's weird, like even like sports, like Formula One. I wrote the theme for Formula One, like and it's like that is, you have like, a few minutes or whatever to encapsulate. With Yellowstone, that was it. Is that like the cool thing with Taylor is that I'd been reading those scripts. I needed the whole story when I wrote that. Like I knew where it was going, and I was like, damn, this needs like weight. Like, and so the idea of a cello solo in the form of like 16th century folk, almost like dirge music for tragedies is what the music was. Like you would do it where you would have after a battle or funerals, like really heavy emotional, like reflective, melancholy music. Like it feels like it's out of a different time, and so for that it was like I needed to kind of in a way make them iconic, these characters, like mythological, like I said, Shakespearean, even like Homerian, like very like like big ideas, and the idea of almost this quasi-religious melody, the na na na, like it just, you're getting into an area that's very, I don't know where it comes from. That's the other thing. I'm an impressionist composer, so I don't sit around and improvise, which most composers do. I'm like the inverted. So I am just sitting there, and all of a sudden I'll hear it in my head, and I have to go pick it out. So in reality, when I talk to students, especially like music students, I unfortunately don't even know how to describe how to write music, because I don't know how it works. It just appears. And the scary part is, of course, you think maybe someday is going to be silence. But fortunately that hasn't happened. And fortunately it didn't happen on Yellowstone, because I love that theme. Whenever I do concerts, I always play the Yellowstone theme. And it's done well in terms of being able to lay the seeds of the score for all these seasons, really, as the basis of it.
Well, we'll hope the silence never happens, because it was great work
Thank you.
on
Yeah, me
Clouds
too.
and
Yeah.
Yellowstone. So everyone who's out there watching, make sure you subscribe to Gold Derby. Keep up to date with us throughout the season. And Brian, thank you so much. It was great talking with you.
Great. Thanks a lot. Take care.